Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
How are you doing, John?
Sam, I'm doing fantastically. Thank you for asking. It's a beautiful but hot day here in central Alabama, and I'm sure it was just as hot recently down in southern Italy, where the G7 recently met to talk about things that are disturbing in the world and just exactly where the West's role is in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I would still prefer hot in southern Italy versus hot in Alabama, personally.
Oh, well, listen, there are probably a lot of people listening to this that would completely agree
I like
with you on that.
Alabama, but I love Italy, so I'm a little jealous of them.
But you get a pass, really, if you didn't know that the G7 was meeting, because it didn't seem to get a whole bunch of ink around here. Far more preoccupied with the NBA Finals, which the Celtics won last night, the Stanley Cup Finals, which I think Florida is going to win tonight. Still think it weird that Florida has a good hockey team.
Yeah.
And just baseball in general, just all things just other than geopolitical politics. But however, I would say at this point in time, despite the American public's general lack of knowledge of geopolitics, in my estimation, it has never been more important. And I think the G7 meeting really over the past weekend really kind of punctuated that in my mind.
Yeah, I tend to keep up with it. I think we both do, probably more than the average person.
I don't think that's difficult.
And yeah, not difficult. But I frankly wasn't. I frankly wasn't aware that a meeting was coming up until probably a day or two before. It just didn't seem like. I feel like this is anecdotal, but it seems like it used to be a bigger deal to have G7 meetings than it was this time. I just kind of saw pictures. I was like, oh, I forgot they were even doing this.
I would tell you that I feel the same way, so there aren't any generational differences there. It used to be a much bigger story in my estimation. Now it's no longer A1, it's A2, A3, maybe B1 or something along those lines, and those are old newspaper sort of terms. However, when I was taking a look at the most recent G7, it's no wonder why it didn't get a lot of press, because in a lot of ways you could have called it Meloni and the lame ducks, or Meloni and the six soon to be ousted from their positions, or the ineffectual men.
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny. We've talked about this and the swings in elections recently, and I think we did it right before the snap elections, or it was after the UK announcement, and before the French one. So it's kind of like you take Germany, you take France, you take the UK. There's a lot of people, the US. There's a lot of people at that meeting that have a very decent. I mean, it varies amongst them, but
very real possibility that they won't be there next year.
There's a decent chance. Those are 4 separate events at least, and there's a decent chance they're all gone next time.
There's a very real chance that all 6 of the other ones besides Meloni will not be there next year. Here in the United States, obviously Joe Biden is trailing in some polls for the general election.
Significantly, I'd say.
In some states, without a doubt. Polls now, I've read something here today, should be considered vibes as opposed to actual polls. Even so, in for the political fight of his life. And right now, I mean, if you were to bet $1 of your own money, a lot of people would take that bet and put it on Trump. That's here in the United States. Once the poster boy for progressive and left-wing causes, Trudeau Justin Trudeau up in Canada is now widely loathed, I think, throughout the Great White North, particularly outside of Ontario or outside of Ottawa, and even more particular, people in places like Alberta and
Calgary
and Saskatoon and Regina and Winnipeg really hate the guy. So he's probably gone with the next elections. The Conservatives are probably coming back. We'll see whether or not Stephen Harper is going to lead that up. Sunak is very hated, is a great word, in the United Kingdom. We've got their elections coming up next month. It's not a question of whether or not the Conservative Party is going to lose. The question is by just how much. Will there be a Tory party after the elections? And some people saying that if the defeat is that bad, the Tory party might have to splinter. Then we have Olaf Scholz and in Germany. His party just got thrashed in the European elections, really almost as bad as Macron's did in France. However, it takes a lot more sort of bureaucratic red tape in order to call for a snap election in Germany. probably the only thing saving Schultz right now at this time. We know about Macron over in France has called for a snap election, and if it were held tomorrow, he's going to get crushed by the far right and the far left. He is sort of what maybe the Democratic Party was underneath Bill Clinton. And right now, because I think largely of his propensity to talk even more than Bill Clinton and not deliver on anything, he is now trailing in the polls pretty significantly. Then we have, who am I leaving out? I'm leaving out Prime Minister Kishida over in Japan, embroiled in a massive, I think, scandal, corruption scandal, and the LDP will probably lose its, where's that, Germany? Or is that Mexico where the LDP is? Regardless, his party, which is ordinarily the king party for prime ministers, is really on the ropes. And if an election was held tomorrow, Kishida would be out with the rest of them. So that leaves Giorgia Meloni as the only prime minister, the only head of a government within the official G7 that is popular. Could get reelected again tomorrow. Her party did incredibly well in the European elections, and she enjoys pretty strong support at home. And right now, it's very, very tempting to say that she's the next Margaret Thatcher. That's a little bit of a stretch, a lot of a stretch. However, right now she appears to be the only stable head of a G7 country. And the reason why I bring this up, the reason why I just went through all of that, is because the G7 has been so important in really setting the stage for the global economy, the global world order that has delivered an enormous amount of peace and prosperity over the last 50, 60 years, obviously with the United States being sort of the more equal of equals. And now when you take a look at it, how is the rest of the world, as we're feeling this undercurrent of turmoil kind of growing around the world, how is the rest of the world going to take a look at the G7, take them seriously, when all of the leaders, save Giorgia Meloni, are lame ducks?
It's a lame duck group right now.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I love Italy, but the Italians aren't going to be the country leading the G7.
No.
It's going to be the U.S. and I guess the U.K. second. I guess maybe really it's but really it's just the U.S. So if this whole group, this continuity is gone, and you zoom back 5, 10, 20 years, that is the economic engine. The U.S. has been, but you add in the second group of economic engines across the globe, it's a no-brainer that this would be what sets the trend and the path for global politics.
Yeah.
In that time.
So when you take a look at this and take a look at really the economic poor performance of the remainder of the G7 over the last, I would say, really 10 years, how are countries like global aspirants like China and even Russia to a degree going to take the global north, if you will, the G7 and other Anglophone countries like Australia and New Zealand? How are they going to take us, using possessive, or not, kind of including me in that? How are they going to take us seriously when we're underperforming economically and we can't get our political act together?
I think part of that goes back to more of in what I would consider the Western countries. You mentioned Australia, countries like that. I view more of a trend towards this kind of nationalistic, that we need to kind of do it ourselves approach. And I think we've seen that in some of the G7 countries. But if this global group that is supposed to be the leader is no longer has the capability or the power to do such, it kind of just reverts back to your own country to kind of handle yourselves. And I think that's a lot of the sentiment that we've seen amongst those countries. The global South, the Chinas of the world, I kind of think they view this as a gap. Almost in a Formula One race, there's a gap to overtake. And so that's this kind of disjointed effort from our global powers. It creates an opportunity.
Listen, I think right now, if I'm President Xi Jinping, sitting in Beijing, if I'm playing the long game to watch the West fall on itself or the global North falter, so I can take over with my civilization. He's been getting away from using the word country and using the word civilization now. this is just brilliant. This could not shake out any better. If I'm Xi Jinping, and taking a look at the U.S. election, that couldn't be. This is a godsend to the Chinese
Great
Communist
timing.
Party. Wonderful timing, and taking a look at everything. I'm not sure if you've ever read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and one of the greatest ways of what he's saying is for all intents and purposes, let your enemy defeat itself.
Yeah.
And I could make a pretty strong argument that I do think that the Chinese, through social media and other things, I do think the Russians are putting out, disruptiveness out there through social media and what have you. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I've read it in enough locations that I do believe that's the case, and it's not just Breitbart or whatnot. I mean, legitimate places. And if countries are tearing themselves at the seams, like it seems like most of the G7 is, someone's got to fill that vacuum, and China, I think, is going to be more than happy to step in and do that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of inarguable. But, while I think Russia and China and probably some others have kind of stoked this tension, if there's nothing to stoke,
well, if there's nothing to stoke.
I think it's still largely we can point at only ourselves for this issue.
It's kind of like that oh my gosh, that old cartoon character called Pogo, who was, I think, a possum. I've seen the enemy and he is us. And that's truly what it is. Only we can tear ourselves apart, but we seem to be tearing ourselves apart on issues that really have already been settled.
It's almost like we've had too much prosperity over the last 15
we
years.
have had too much peace and prosperity, and now we're looking for ways to screw it up. And so I go through all this because increasingly I am concerned, not necessarily over the next 12 months, but maybe over the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years, how the West has a really good thing going. Mm-hmm. We pretty much, using again the collective, we pretty much set the rules for individual property rights, rule of law, development of human capital, economic growth, transparent financial systems, all of these things which have brought unprecedented prosperity to so many people and lifted hundreds of millions, billions of people out of poverty, all largely based on a Judeo-Christian ethic that now, for whatever reason, we seem to want to turn our back on all of the things that have made us so strong, at least our ruling elites seem to be. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think you're seeing that huge shift to the right. It's not that people love Donald Trump. It's not the fact that people love Le Pen.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that people love whoever's in charge of labor now.
Even Meloni. She seemed like a fringe candidate at first.
It is the fact that they are saying something different than what the ruling elites are saying now.
That's what I view it as, more so than this kind of left versus right. It almost feels like, in general, it's these fringe, it seems like too strong of a word, but these kind of outsider candidates, or because Sunak is inarguably part of the ruling elite.
My gosh, yes.
I mean, he's almost the textbook definition of it.
Yeah.
So they're moving kind of the opposite way in terms of a left versus right thing, but I think it's more exactly what you said. People are getting tired of this kind of ruling elite and want something to change.
Something to change, and for me, it's everyone wants change. Now, don't get me wrong, change is inevitable and change is good. If we didn't have change, we'd still be all living on farms and cutting wheat with scythes. Change is good. However, it is how you change and what the message is with the change that makes all the difference. I would tell you, going from Tsarist Russia, which had its problems, to Bolshevism.
Bolsheviks.
That change was painful. A lot of people died.
Not great either.
A lot of people died. You had the murders of the kulaks. You had the Holodomor in Ukraine. You had the Red Terror. You had tens of millions of people died. That wasn't good change. And communist China. You had the Great Leap Forward. maybe tens of millions of people died.
Yeah.
You had the great proletarian cultural revolution. This is all change, and it hadn't been good. However, the change that we have had in the West, largely in a lot of ways, has been good over the last 100 years. It's a more just society, and now we still are looking inwards with hatred as to why things are broken. And I would say that's not necessarily the case at all. And so when our ruling elites won't do anything about that, that's how a Donald Trump comes to power. That's why people put on red hats. That's why Olaf Scholz is a lame duck. That's why Macron, for all he talks, is unpopular. That's why Trudeau is unpopular. It's like, hey, leave it alone. We got a pretty good thing going here. Let's not try to screw it up too much. And that's where I think a huge part of the problem in the West is, and the global South is just loving it. And the thing is, you take a look at like a person like Modi. Did Modi even talk to Biden at the G7 meeting?
I don't know.
I mean, well, there are a bunch of pictures of he and Meloni.
Yeah.
A ton of them. And Modi was clipped a little bit, but not much. They're trying to make a lot of Modi being clipped in the most recent elections over there. Unprecedented third term, all that stuff. And so when you take a look at the remainder of the global South, I'm going, if I'm Modi, if I'm Xi, if I'm whoever's in charge of Vietnam, and all these other countries, I'd be going, I don't need to waste my time with these idiots. There, I've said it. What do you think?
Yeah, Modi seems to be in the
proverbial catbird seat.
It's kind of this perfect spot where it doesn't have the reputation, the negative reputation in a lot of senses that China has right now. I mean, people view it as this up-and-coming democracy. And whether that's really the best way to put it or not, I'm not going to get into that here, but that they're in the driver's seat for that. You're seeing more industries and more people, diversifying out of China, oftentimes to cheaper labor, to often better labor.
I think, as we've said here, India makes the most sense for a China plus one in terms of your supply chain. To completely diversify away from the People's Republic. You go to Vietnam as your plus one, you go to an Indonesia as your plus one, you're still dealing with China.
Yeah.
However, in India plus one, they've got enough internal capacity where you may or may not be dealing with China, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they're the ones I think have the biggest gap to overtake.
I think that they've got a huge.
And we've
gap.
talked about Mexico is just kind of losing opportunities and the potential energy with that country.
Potential energy with that country, the potential energy, I think, really throughout South America. Tons of potential in Brazil that they can't tap on.
Maybe Argentina.
Tons of potential in Argentina. We'll see how long this guy lasts. I would imagine a couple more years of restructuring, and the Peronis will be back on top. That just seems to happen too much. Someone that has some level to the Kirchner family will be back in power in Buenos Aires. So I'll bet you $1 on that right now.
Okay.
All right, there you go. A little fist bump. There you have it. 4 years. Someone, the Peronist,
put that on the calendar for 2028.
Or the Kirchners. And so I guess when it comes down to it, we're getting a little bit close to the end here. When I see all of the stuff that's going on throughout the remainder of the world, when I see a G7 meeting that is incredibly unanticipated, largely ignored in the United States, populated by 6 lame ducks in Meloni, which really, did you read the communique?
No,
did anyone read the communique?
All I saw was pictures and a few videos of the base jump or
of
the
Snow White and the 6 lame ducks. I mean, and did anyone read the communique? That used to be a big thing. I mean, there was a huge amount over Meloni's refusal to put abortion in there. But that is about it. I imagine a lot of people listening to this haven't read the communique.
Yeah.
And it shows you that if we think the G7 is worthless, it doesn't really do anything any longer, what does the remainder of the global South think? What does a Xi Jinping think? What does a Modi think? What is I'm going to keep on saying AMLO. What is AMLO, or the woman that followed him down there, Scheinbaum, something like that?
Scheinbaum.
What do they think? And do they want to hook their future, hook their whatever onto a falling star or declining power, or figure out ways to be with the winners over the next 100 years.
And it all starts with the U.S.
It really does.
I mean, it's kind of not to. The other countries will fall in line, at least to some regards. I mean, at the end of the day, if there's a very strong U.S., a strong, well-led U.S. in terms of the G7, I think the group is fine. The problem, even with weakness, even if it was Macron and Schultz and Sunak and the rest of the bunch, but if there's strong U.S. leadership and guidance there, I think that, I mean, we are by far still the biggest superpower, especially in that bunch, and without that, the whole group's going to crumble.
That might cinch the ears of some people living in Western Europe or Canada or Japan. However, I hate to agree. I don't hate to agree with you. I completely agree with you on that. The Western world, the global North, is much better off with a well-led, unified, and strong United States. And so when we take a look at things right now, I would say be very difficult to say the U.S. has been well led for a period of time. I would say that we're not unified, and increasingly we're looking a little bit weaker. So that's from an American's point of view. The people throughout the world might think I'm crazy, but that's what the perception is in the United States. Why a Donald Trump might have the potential to win, even with all of his problems and his brusque, I should say, personality. And I think the world would be better off if we weren't behaving the way that we currently are, and I think the global North would be able to reestablish some sort of moral equivalency or moral dominance, and certainly economic, which would be, frankly, ultimately good for the remainder of the world as well.
I agree completely.
All right, guys. Wow, we kind of went off the rails a little bit here today, talking about the G7, talking about moral equivalencies and all that stuff. And I would tell you that we always love to hear from y'all. If you have any questions or comments, by all means, please let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in reading more or hearing more of what we have to say or what we think, you can always go to oakworth.com, oakwrth.com. Take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of exciting information. This would include links to previous Trading Perspectives podcasts, links to our blog Common Sense, as well as links to other thought leadership topics and essays. That being said, Sam, give you one last chance to say something awesome on this exciting topic.
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.